So, so absolutely delighted to have three-time All-Ireland final referee and inter-county referee David Coldrick joining us on the podcast. David, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much.
Well, this is something we've wanted to do for a while now because we've had a lot of heat discussions about refereeing decisions in this house. Obviously, Daniel, you've been a referee as well for a while. So, David, if you mind telling us how you first got into refereeing, how you started.
Yeah, if I can remember it so long ago now. But I started when I was 17. So I was still playing at the time. But kind of thought probably like what you're saying there, that through my playing days, that like there were decisions going against me. I was thinking like that this can't be that hard. So but then I kind of thought, well, either you can keep giving out about it, or you can try it yourself. So then I decided to try it myself. And started, like, I mean, it was hard to know where it was going to go, but started just refereeing underage, like under 13, under 15, like under 17 within the county. And but started to enjoy it, like, and it kind of just snowballed. Like, I mean, there's probably no different today. There were very few kind of young up and coming referees in the county. So once the county board became aware of a new referee kind of on the block, I got kind of more attention, and started kind of getting into adult level games, and it just went from there. But yeah, initially it really was just I kind of thought it couldn't be that difficult, like, and just gave it a go.
And when did you first start refereeing adult games then? When would that have been?
I'd say it was only within 2 years. I'd say I was refereeing adult games at 19. Now that would have been the kind of the lower levels, the junior C, junior D, like, within the county, like, but then at the same time, it wasn't long kind of coming through those various levels up into intermediate, and then obviously ultimately into senior. So I'd say all in, it was probably, by 21, I'd say I was refereeing, certainly at senior level in the county.
And that can actually be quite make or break, especially at that age. Dan, you would have had experience of refereeing adults at that age.
Yeah, just the last thing on this show, I kind of, because I play at the moment, so I'm doing a lot of the odd time just refereeing junior games. How is that experience, when my kind of understanding is a lot of people are just playing gaff, just on every Sunday, and wouldn't have that much knowledge of the rules. Like, it's hard enough as it is when they do know the rules, but I guess if they don't, how did you find that couple of years, like 19 to 21, before you got on to senior?
Yeah, like, you're right. That is interesting, I suppose. Like, because what you find, all right, like, it's either, or what I found was, it was either like, young players kind of on the way up, trying to get into, like, their first team of the club, like, but they're actually on the second team, which happens to be junior initially, or it's kind of guys that were senior players, I'm going to say, on their way down, which is probably a little bit unfair, but anyway, like, and so, but then, they had kind of started, let's say, losing their fitness, and then they were up against, like, these youngsters who were like running rings around them, like, so there's, what they can do and not do in terms of trying to stop them, let's say. But yeah, like, it's funny, like, as you go through the levels, I'd say, like, junior C, junior B were probably some of the most difficult games that I've ever done, like, and as you get up into intermediate, and then ultimately into senior, um, like, as you said, like, it's not that they know all the rules at that either, like, but at the same time, they do have a better view of rules, like, and they're probably cleverer, just trying to trying to catch you out, like, but it gets easier that way as you go through the levels. But yeah, no, they were tough, and there's no doubt, like, that over those kind of first 2 years, I would say, for any referee, those kind of first 1 or 2 years, they're the most difficult years. If you get past the first year or two and you're still happy with how you're refereeing, you're likely to keep going. But I know a lot of referees who have kind of started, but then don't get through those first year or two, and then, don't keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's probably what was your parents' and your mum and dad's take on going out to referee at a young age? Because obviously it can be quite a daunting task. There's a lot of verbal abuse. What was their take on it?
Yeah, well, I was lucky, I suppose, that Dad would come with me, like, every game, because, like, well, initially he'd be driving me, so until I got my own license, and but he would come as umpire, so he was there from day one, so that obviously was helpful. Now, I suppose, like, he was involved in GA, so, like, he knew what it was going to be like, and he knew that, I suppose, that both myself and himself needed to kind of have or try to develop a thick skin and a thick neck or whatever, like, Mom would have been more worried, there's no doubt about that, and would have been probably worried right up to when I was doing All Irelands, like, so it would have been pretty much no different all the way up. But it was good to have Dad there kind of right from the word go anyway with me.
And just on, so the progression, what age did you start thinking, wow, I'm actually doing well here, I'm inter-county's a target of mine, or was it natural progression, or how did it come about?
So I'd say, like, as I made kind of made the kind of the breakthrough, like, at senior level in the county, I started probably, there came a time when I had to kind of think, okay, where's this going and where's my playing career going? I love playing, but it was then like, well, am I more likely to get to Croke Park on what was, let's say, the third Sunday in September as a player or a referee? And I think I was in my mid-20s where so what happened was that, like, as you kind of get doing senior games in the county, that the county then put me forward for a Leinster course. So once I got onto, like, the fringes of the Leinster panel, I was finding it difficult to combine playing and refereeing, and I needed to make a choice. And it was a tough choice. It was definitely a tough choice. But it really, at that point, it was, I might be okay at this, and I might be able to go all the way. And I think it was at kind of that point that the goal was to go all the way, and therefore take refereeing seriously. And unfortunately then having to giving up playing at that stage.
And then obviously that would have been a bit of controversy maybe in the club when you're giving up your playing career. What was the take in the club like?
I was never going to be the star man for the club, I don't think. Like, I love playing for the club, don't get me wrong, but yes, absolutely, it wasn't it wasn't an easy decision for me. And then I'm sure that there were lots of people kind of wondering, are you sure, you're really sure you want to do this? Like, your mid-20s, but and it was a tough decision, but I made it, and I didn't look back then, I suppose.
And then you obviously started going into inter-county. What year did you make your inter-county debut?
I think it was so maybe around 99, I'd say, that I made kind of my my kind of first game in Leinster.
And then obviously you would have been reffing in Meath, looking at the likes of Trevor Giles and Graham Gardy. You would have got a nice up close view of them too.
Yeah. And look, I suppose that's the like the good thing about, like, refereeing at that level, either senior level within a county, or then, like, as you get onto the inter-county stage, like, refereeing is it's difficult, but you're up close and personal with, like, either some of the best players within your county, or the best players in the country, and, like, some of the things that those guys can do, like, are is phenomenal. So, like, that's a great experience.
And yeah, so moving on to how you progressed in the inter-county scene. So you started off in 1999. When did the All Ireland final become a goal, or how did it work in terms of working your way up? Like, I presume there was a match assessment after each game, for example.
Yeah. So I think, like, from the point that I kind of made it onto the Leinster panel, I think the goal was always, like, okay, well, I've made this decision of stopping playing and going refereeing in order to make it on that third Sunday in September for the All-Ireland final. So I think it started becoming more real, let's say, as I moved on to the Leinster panel. And I'd say within 2 years then, so the early kind of 2000s, had kind of made it onto the fringes of the national panel. And yeah, I suppose, you do your Leinster games, you're assessed after every game. It's through those assessments that kind of, you get more games. And then, as I got onto the fringes of the national panel, you start with kind of the, Division 3, Division 4 league games. And again, you're assessed in each of those games. And, it's every step on the ladder, and then kind of from kind of those Division 3, Division 4 league games into the likes of kind of minor and under 21 championships, and then suddenly into kind of championship, senior intercounty championship, a couple of years later. But it's kind of taking every step, not thinking there's something to be learned at every step along the way. Don't be over eager. If you're good enough, you'll get there. But it's like everything in life, you do need to go kind of one step at a time.
And just for example, assessment, I've had a small bit of experience myself. So on an intercounty level, for people that wouldn't obviously have a background in refereeing, is every decision, for example, are you scrutinized on 100 decisions, or is it a case that they take a certain part of the game, or they give you the headlines basically on what you need to work on?
Yeah, it's kind of changed over the years. It used to be almost every decision. You'd get an assessment, and you could be reading it for an hour or two, and then it would also depend on the assessor. Some assessors are really detailed, and they'd pretty much point out everything while trying to summarize it, in terms of an overall comment. But you would get everything. And you'd be marked on everything. There actually was marking. So it used to be out of 100. Now different areas of the game, you're handling control of the game, and how you applied kind of rules in terms of aggressive fouls and so on. And those key game decisions, they obviously got the most points, but you also kind of got points deducted, let's say, for technical fouls, the pick up off the ground that you missed or whatever. But certainly in the last couple of years, it's come up a level. It's no longer kind of that detailed. It's trying to focus on those key game decisions, those kind of, penalty calls, the kind of black, yellow, red card calls, those kind of ones, and your kind of control of the game. It gives you a bit more in terms of some of the detail, but not the way it was, let's say, 5-6 years ago. It's trying to be. I feel we've kind of come from maybe it being more negative and nearly a put down. It's much more constructive now in terms of the assessments, and I think as well, it doesn't make a huge difference, but they try to change it. They no longer call it an assessment; they call it an advice form, to try to get away from the kind of the negative connotations of assessment.
So then, obviously, when you started off your intercounty refereeing career, would that for someone young enough to do it, you would have been clashing with your career? How did you work in terms of, say if on a Saturday you have to drive to Wexford and for a game and then go back into work? How did you find the balance of that straight away?
Yeah, it was tough, and it continues to be tough. Trying to combine both. Now, what I try to do, kind of in order to kind of keep my fitness up. I've been lucky enough, I suppose. I work in Irish Life, and there's a gym on site, so I do an awful lot of my training 7 to 8 o'clock in the morning, most mornings, in order to try and keep the fitness up. So I use that, I suppose, to that's how I combined kind of getting my physical fitness and keeping my physical fitness for the game, with working as well. But it's tricky. Obviously the GAA is it's a pastime. It doesn't pay the bills. So like work has to, has to come first that way, like, but the company has been very good to me as well. Like, I mean, I do remember that when when I first went out to Australia with the under 17 tour, back in, I think it might have been 98 maybe. But like they gave me kind of 2 weeks additional leave, like, because I was, in the same way as the players, I was representing Ireland. So they actually gave me 2 weeks kind of extra holidays above and beyond the normal, in order to do that. So like, it has been good that way, but it's always it's a constant challenge to combine the two.
And just last thing, so for intercounty in terms of expenses, and how does it work? Because obviously you've got 4 umpires that you would work. I presume, I'm only guessing here now, 4 umpires that you bring to most games. You might, I'm not sure if you have a panel of 5 or 6. But how does it work with expenses there? Because a lot of people aren't sure that, for example, like a club referee gets €40 in Dublin, for example. How would it work intercounty wise on expenses, etc.?
Yeah, so we don't get let's say a flat match fee. It's a travel allowance, let's say, or like 50 cent a mile, and then we do get a food allowance as well, which is €40 per person. So yeah, so for myself and my 4 umpires, we'd have €40 per person, like, in terms of getting some food after the game or whatever. So that plus whatever I actually have traveled for a particular day.
How did you choose your 4 umpires at the start?
At the start, it was pretty simple. I had my father, my brother, my uncle, and a next door neighbor. They were my 4. Like, it's hard, and I know it's like, I mean, it's hard for club referees to get 4 umpires. Like, it definitely is. But yeah, so the 4 guys came with me. I've kind of, that 4, none of that 4 is obviously with me now. Like, I'm probably on my 3rd kind of team of umpires at this point. And yeah, now, like, say I'd have 6 or 7 umpires that I try to choose from. But again, even with 6 or 7, like, it's a pastime for them. It's not saying that they're always going to be available, like, to come with me, like, either to a club game or an intercounty game, like, so it's great to have them. And usually out of that 6 or 7, I'll always kind of have 4 then for a particular game.
And then moving on slightly, so obviously in 2007 you get the call to referee your first All-Ireland football final. Tell us about how first of all, how it came about, and what was your feelings on the phone call?
Yeah, like, I mean, it's obviously a fantastic feeling to get. Like, I mean, I do remember, like, back then, the Super 8s has changed a little bit, like, but you kind of knew that if you were one of the quarterfinal referees, that meant that one of that 4 is going to do the All-Ireland. So you've obviously proven yourself to get the quarterfinal, but now it's like, it depends how you perform in that quarterfinal. So I felt that, like, it went well, but there were other referees obviously in the other quarterfinals that went well for as well. So you're kind of thinking, geez, it'd be great to get it. And again, you also knew that, like, the call, if it was going to come Monday fortnight before the final. So you'd have your phone on, obviously, all morning, and waiting to see whether that call is going to come to you. I think I remember, again, I was in work that day, and I think it was lunchtime. Wouldn't normally bring my phone to lunch, but did. Yeah, the head of referees in Croke Park was Pierce Freeney at the time. So yeah, he rang me to give me the good news, and yeah, it was fantastic. Like, I mean, the thing is, it's fantastic getting the call. I was delighted afterwards. Then it's kind of like, right, now I have to actually go and do it.
Yeah, exactly. So what's the build up to that? Like, obviously the pressure, All-Ireland football final day, it's in every paper, it's on every radio station. How is that, dealing with that pressure of, you're the man in charge?
Yeah, like, I mean, what I try to do is, you try to kind of keep away from as much of that build up as possible. It is difficult. It is very difficult. What I've tended to do for my three All Irelands, like, you know, is like in that kind of fortnight period, like, you know, before the final, and particularly let's say in that last week, myself and Mairead we'd actually head off for 3 or 4 days. So depending who was in the final. So like obviously the first final was Cork and Kerry. So once you keep out of Munster, you're okay, like, you know. But yeah, we'd head to some county just for a couple of days away, and try to keep away from TV, papers, etc. In order to, because it's pressure enough, like, you know, you're going to be thinking about it yourself. So you don't need all the external stuff getting in, or you need to try to, you know, block out as much of that as possible and do your own build up. But that's how I found trying to do that, like actually getting away for that couple of days and only coming back to Dublin on that kind of Friday evening before the game.
Brilliant. Now, moving on, David, to, I suppose, a wider picture on refereeing. And I want to start off with young referees. So I'd probably be rare enough in the sense that I'd be still refereeing while playing. But obviously, like you mentioned yourself, if people with club matches clashing, for example, if you want to ref at a decent level yourselves, that you're going to have to pick one or the other. How do we encourage younger referees to referee? Because I actually heard you mention there that when you were coming in, that young referees weren't coming through. I suppose, is that something we're always saying and it might not be the case, or is it the case that right now it's probably as bad as it ever been in terms of young refs not coming through enough?
I'm not sure. Like, I mean, I think it's probably very similar. Over the years, I'm not sure it's changed that much. Certainly not. Like obviously I referee in Meath, so you know, you might see, you know, a couple of new referees a year. Now, to be fair, there are times, and depending on who's kind of the referees coordinator in the county, they might try, you know, something new and try to get a, you know, suddenly, you know, 10, 15 new referees, like, you know, and try to kit them out, get them through the process and so on. But then we're still like, maybe 2 years later, you might only have 3 or 4 of that group. Like, it is difficult. Like, I know that for me, and at the moment, obviously, I don't have a huge amount of time, like, you know, but what I like to do, if at all possible, is like when you see a new up and coming referee within the county, it would be kind of making yourself available to that person, let's say, for them to give you a shout, let's say, if they want to discuss anything, if they're coming against, you know, if they got like abuse in a particular game, or if they want to talk about abuse and how to deal with it and so on, just be available for that. But there's probably not enough support within counties, you know, to give to up and coming referees as they kind of get into difficulties, and suddenly they might have talked to no one before they've actually just decided, I've had enough, like, you know.
And is that something maybe that the GAA for inter-county refs do better than maybe county boards for their own refs, in terms of if you've refed a game and you might have made a bad decision and, you know, there's some sort of abuse, the GAA would come in and help you, the head of the refereeing in the GAA?
Yeah, no, so it definitely is, but then I suppose it's you would hope that would happen, and it's easier for it to happen at inter-county level. Like, I mean, we have a head of refereeing in Croke Park. He has, now it's not a big support team, but he has a support team, and then you have the National Referees Committee as well. Like, you know, so between the head of referees and the head of the National Referees Committee, they're available, and we now have a psychologist as well that we can talk to if we need to talk to. So that's developed over the years. So I think at senior intercounty we're in a good spot, but it's very difficult kind of to bring that down from there to kind of within each county, and that's where the problem is, like, you know. And a lot, obviously, or practically all of the referees coordinators and those supporting referees within the counties, you know, they are all giving up their time as best they can. So there's only so much time that they can actually give. Whereas, like, obviously at Croke Park level, that is their full-time job.
Yeah, and like you said, it's kind of developed over time, and it's something that, you know, people years ago might have, you know, attacked referees straight away, and now people are realizing, look, it's not an easy job. More and more people have done it. Dan, you've obviously had experience of refereeing. When you before you first came a ref, was that something that you struggled with? You know, thinking, refereeing is easy, for example.
Yes, David, I'd like to get your take on this. So my journey, I to be honest with you, I dealt with it well enough, the abuse, and I had a kind of notion in my head that I could crack this very easily in terms of letting things go and being for want of a better description, a popular referee. You know, I quickly learned that when you start letting things go, you end up in awkward situations big time, and then you end up almost on the other side. So I learned over the last couple of years the rule book is your friend in a way, in terms of you give the first foul you see before things develop. But going back to the abuse side of things, you know, I something I dealt with very well. But then, for example, last year, I just lost the rag with a supporter who was kept at me the whole game, and then at the end of the game had a bit of a verbal spat back and forth. And I afterwards I was just like, what am I doing here? And to be honest with you, I've kind of taken a step back and focused on the playing now. Because this is something I never struggled with. Like, I've been nearly 10 years refereeing, and all of a sudden that hit. I guess from your own experience with dealing with abuse, coming the way through, how did you find that? And in terms of other referees, you know, is there a case that we're like, for example, I should probably reported that to the county board, and so it doesn't happen to another referee going forward?
Yeah, like it's difficult now. Like, I mean, I've, you know, examples or you know, of things like you've mentioned there as well. Like, I mean, you know, I've been refereeing now for like since 17, like, you know, so that's a long time. But then, you know, I could be out doing like an Ulster Championship game on a Sunday, and think that, like, well, that should be the most difficult one, but actually it's probably the following Thursday night, like, you know, down in Screen, like, you know, doing an adult kind of senior intermediate game. And I do remember there have been times when you know, actually it is very hard. Like, again, similar to yourself, I would try, I would be pretty good at not letting things get to me. And I try to communicate as best I can with players in terms of my decisions. Like, you know, they mightn't always agree with them, but I'll always try to communicate. But like, there's the odd game, and whether it's just because of the way you are going into it, because maybe, you know, work has been tricky or whatever, it's like, this is just not worth it, like, you know. And it's very hard to restrain yourself. It definitely is. And, you know, so I've had those kind of games where, okay, it may not have got to that I've actually just let it go, but I found it very, very difficult to kind of just keep it. And actually, in those kind of games, what I find myself doing is actually, right, it looks like it doesn't matter how much talking I do to players or, you know, to mentors, whatever, it's just not going in. So, right, I'm just going to play by the rules, ref by the rules, and I'm not going to talk at all. And I'm just going to get on and get off. But like, you're right though, like, I would always say, and I know it can be difficult, and I know it in counties, referees can sometimes come under pressure, you know, not to report things. But I would always say, like, you know, you have to report for yourself, and then, as you said there as well, for, you know, your colleague that's out next week with that same team, but they've been let off previous week, you let them off, well, then they're going to do it the same thing the following week. Like, that is the only way that it will get better. And we have to hope, I suppose, that then when you do report abuse, that the powers that be within the counties actually do kind of take action. Now, I know as well that, like, there's only so much you can do. You know, once you've reported, then it is over to those committees, and you can't kind of get tied up with, like, you know, what they do or don't do. But you, as I said, as a referee, you would hope that they would support you.
You spoke there about the importance of communication with players on the field. You've been the subject of a couple of documentaries. I remember back, I think it was 2014, was the Men in Black one for Setanta Sports. And I couldn't get over, first of all, your communication with the players, but how you communicated with your umpires, your linesmen over, I think there was a ball that went over the post, or might have been wide, but you still went in, you got all sides of the view, and then came to a conclusion in the end. Is that so important, the communication on the field?
It totally is. Absolutely. Like, you know, as you said, communication between the referee and the players, but even more so communication between the referee, the 4 umpires, 2 linesmen, 4th official, that full group. Like, you know, we're a team on the day, I think as well, like, you know, obviously this is in terms of how far we've come. Like, I mean, it wasn't always that way. Like, you know, we now obviously have the full communication kits. Some aren't as good as others, depending on, you know, what grounds and counties you're in. But ultimately, they are getting better and better. And obviously the ones in Croke Park are fantastic. But like, communication happens like right from the word go to that final whistle. And it is important that like, it's not communication for, you know, just the sake of it, you know, but it is like, you know, it's there, and you need to use it, like, you know, and that yeah, that absolutely is really important. I think in those documentaries, that's probably the, you know, the one thing that people probably didn't think was happening. Or, you know, obviously we're not like rugby, so, you know, you don't have the kind of the ref link or whatever, and you don't hear it on the TV. So I think that was probably one of the big things that kind of came out of those two documentaries.
So then, so you obviously ref the 2010 All-Ireland football final in the rain, and then 2015 is the Dublin Kerry one, again in the rain, and this is the one that was recorded for RTE. There was a documentary again, All-Ireland final day. And the thing, like you just said there, the communication, I couldn't get over how even towards the latter stages, when Brian Sheehan gets a yellow card, you're explaining the rule and how you've come to the decision, and your linesman has told you it's a yellow card. Is that something that, you know, looking back when people were speaking to you, was that something that you went, well, that's my job, this is how hard it is, this is what you have to do?
Yeah, look, I mean, I said, like, I mean, communication for any referee is really important. I think, like, you know, a referee that can't communicate his decisions, it makes kind of players very frustrated. Like, as I kind of said earlier, it's not that they will agree with you at all times, but at least they know that, like, look, you're kind of saying, from my angle, which is like, you know, the same kind of angle as you're at here, this is what I saw, this is why I gave it. And at least if you're able to have that communication with a player, I think it does help. I think as well, like, I mean, that physical fitness, which is one of the key things for any referee, but like, if you're up with the play, so if you're up with the play, that also gives you an advantage, because they can see that you're within 10 yards of an incident or whatever, like, you know, so you're both explaining the incident and you're within 10 yards. So I think that's, you know, that's really, really important.
Tell us a bit then about that All-Ireland final, Dublin and Kerry, and how difficult that was to referee, not only because it's Dublin and Kerry and the hype around it, but the conditions on the day made it virtually impossible.
Yeah, like, absolutely. I mean, it was a downpour right from pretty much the first minute. I think we kind of, you know, as you said, All Ireland finals, they're highly pressurized anyway. Like, you know, having said that, like, the most pressure is that kind of 10-15 minutes before you throw up the ball, like, you know, and once you throw up the ball, and I know it's a cliche, but it is like any other game. Like, there's only one set of rules, so you have to try and, like, you know, just ref it, and then, you know, you can take stock afterwards. But it was tricky, as you said, a lot because of those conditions. We would have said, like, the team of officials would have said, you know, that, like, you know, look, we need to allow for the conditions as best we can. And the way that I suppose I tried to do that was, like, you know, that, like, okay, the first offence, you know, if it was kind of 50-50 or whatever, like, you know, but it might have been because of, like, underground, you know, underfoot conditions, that you kind of give the benefit of the doubt, but then again communicate it to the player, like, you know, so let's not act rash, because we could put ourselves under pressure, like, you know, over a 70-minute game. But yeah, it seemed to, like, again, the players, you know, still played football in those conditions, like, you know, and that obviously made my life easier as well.
And then, obviously, for that documentary, was that something you're very proud of, how you ref that All Ireland?
Yeah, well, I'm very proud. You know, I was very proud having got the All Ireland. You know, there's always decisions you look back on every game, like, you know, and you kind of say, you know, maybe I could have done something different there, or should have done something different there. But by and large, you know, I was happy enough with how the final went, like, you know. But I think, you know, we're like each of us, I think no matter what kind of referee you are, whether it's a club referee or an intercounty referee, I think we are our harshest critics, our own kind of harshest critics. So normally you don't need to hear from an assessor or an advisor. You'll know yourself, how you've done, and I think that's the same no matter what level you're refereeing at.
And you spoke before how in the lead up to a game you'll take yourself away. What do you do after the game? Would you sit down and watch the Sunday game, or would you listen to any of the pundits or read any papers?
Again, I try not to, but it is difficult. I wouldn't tend to watch games afterwards. The only way that I'd pretty much watch myself afterwards would be obviously at intercounty level we would meet up maybe once every couple of weeks, and we would have kind of video analysis. So that's when I'd see myself back. Normally, I wouldn't like to see myself back, because if they're showing clips, that usually means there's something not quite right. But look, it's part and parcel. But that's tricky as well, because we're kind of, as a group, we're kind of, it's a peer group analysis, so you're up there in lights in front of your fellow referees, but it is part and parcel, and is always constructive, to be fair to the guys,
So absolutely. I'm just going to run through some of the rule changes and your take on it, and I'll get Daniel's take on it. So first of all, has been the introduction of the mark, first from the kick out and now the advance mark. How hard is that going to be to ref? I know we've had a few games already, and what do you think the actual basis of it? Do you think it's a good idea?
Yeah, I think it is a good idea. And I think certain teams, intercounty teams, back in the league, had kind of, some had got to grips with it and used it to their advantage very, very well. Others didn't. At club level, hard to know if teams are using it as a kind of an extra strategy, let's say, or whether it's just, if they're in trouble, they'll just boot it in and see what happens. So hard to see how good or effective it will be at club level. But I think definitely at intercounty level, we've already seen some teams really seeing it as something that could benefit them over some of their rivals. There's no doubt about that. I think from a refereeing point of view, what I've seen, from a couple of games just back at club level, well, you're on your own, largely. So it's kind of making sure, was he inside or outside that 45, when he kicked that ball, and then also even just earlier this week, I think it was there was a free in midfield, and I was talking to the player in terms of explaining my decision, and got a little bit sidetracked, and the ball got delivered long, inside forward, took a clean catch, put his hand up, looking for a mark, and I awarded it, and then realized that came from a free. So then I had to, change my mind. So it's just more things for a referee to think about. And obviously there's lots of things that we're thinking about anyway, on that particular rule anyway.
And absolutely. One of the other ones is the kick out from the 21 now, Dan. I know you've had a bit of experience in the week kicking out from the 21. How do you find that one?
I think that's a good rule overall, David, because it gets defenders go one side, and it just means the ball can be kicked. It'd stop that short kick out, I suppose, at intercounty level. But with these rules, I sometimes see, I think you've kind of mentioned already, that they think of it with the intercounty game in mind, where they don't think of the junior one referee, which is still a big level. Like for example, we're a junior one club here at Geraldine Moorings, and we have to learn these rules that I know full well aren't going to be implemented by referees either, because they just genuinely missed it. Like for example, we had a challenge game on Sunday, and I only remember the mark 20 minutes ago, and I was like, there was definitely one or two marks, and it just no one knew about it. So in a big game, and now you have to put your hand up for a kick out mark, technically. So and that was rewarded against someone, and I'd forgotten about that. I was like, so you have to have the hand up, and if you don't have the hand up, technically the ref has to, you play it on, and you're over carrying. So I just think sometimes, I want to get your take. Sometimes I think Crow Park are too thinking of the intercounty scene and not focus maybe on the club game sometimes as well.
Yeah, so I do think that what I always kind of struggle a bit with is, I suppose, why if they want to bring something in at intercounty level, like, why can't it just be at intercounty level? Like, so, why is it that, like, I know they want to try and keep the rules, one set of rules all the way down, but if you are thinking of things that can really only be policed when you have, like, two linesmen, maybe a fourth official, like for example, the sin bin and the 10 minutes. Like, I found again, like, on Friday night, as the league started back in Meath, one guy, I went off on a black card offence, like maybe 2 minutes before halftime, but like just putting that extra pieces of information in the book in terms of, okay, he went off at 29. When did I blow that halftime whistle? How much time has he left, to come back on? And when you're doing that all on your own, it's tricky. But yeah, so, like, if they feel something is needed at intercounty, doesn't necessarily mean it's needed all the way down and is enforceable all the way down. And they need to take more of that into account, which maybe they don't always do.
You just mentioned it. The black card is probably the single most controversial rule change in recent times. How do you find it, and do you get people's understanding of the actual rule itself, not what people interpret the rule as, but the actual understanding of it has to be, say, for example, dragged down to the floor or whatever? Do you think people understand the actual ruling behind it?
No, I don't think so.
I thought so.
But I think, like, actually, when it came in first, and maybe it hasn't changed too much, to be honest. I think everybody thought, like, every foul was a black card, and you'd hear a black card for everything, which obviously wasn't and isn't the case. Now, having said that, I do think that the pull down one is not, well, in rule maybe it sounds clear cut, but then on the field and as you kind of referee games, it's not as clear cut, and therefore any rule that isn't as clear cut as it needs to be, you're going to have consistency issues, like, between referees, which is what we're seeing on the pull down rule. And I'll admit, like, that at intercounty we struggle with that one. I think the other black card ones are largely okay, but that pull down one, and what's the difference between a pull down versus a pull back, and whether, like, the pull back was the foul and then he happened to go to ground, so it's not really a pull down. Now, and then in other cases you're kind of like, are we making our lives, like, just way too difficult here? Like, so just a pull down is a pull down and that's it. But yeah, that the black card, obviously it's going to continue to get attention no matter what, like, in its current form.
And one thing, for example, the pull down's a great example. If I'm pulling Sean's jersey here and I haven't had a foul yet and I don't pull him down to the ground, like, there's no basis for you to give a yellow card then for a cynical foul, because it's just a noting offence. And Crow Park, like, you should hear, it might be you in the middle or it might be anyone in the middle, you should hear the hill when someone applies the rule correctly there and doesn't A, give the black card, or B, a yellow card, and just gives a noting offence. I'm pretty sure it happened in the All-Ireland final with Connor Lane this year, but it happens a lot.
Yeah.
And people are like, oh, that's just a wrong call, and no one goes, well, it's actually a right call, and we either need to look at the rule or people need to start learning the rule. But it doesn't make sense, to be honest with you, in fairness to fans, that you can pull a jersey off a fella, but so long as it's not deemed rough play, I guess it's the only way you can give him a yellow there.
Yeah, and it's this thing, like, that, like, in certain situations, like, if a guy's going through on goal or whatever, like, or is getting into a scoring position, and then he's seriously tugged back, but he's just tugged back, that is cynical. There is no doubt it's cynical. But per rule, as you said, if he hasn't committed any other offence, then it is just a noting offence. That's just the way the rule is.
Yeah, I've definitely heard the Hill go mad at a few decisions like that over the years.
Yeah, but like, it's just frustrating when it's the right call. Like, I'll be honest with you, like, I shouldn't really say this, but if I'm in a club game, I'll try and find a way to give him a yellow with the rough play, which I shouldn't be really doing either. But the point is that it's a cynical foul. He's true on goal. Like you said, it's a one-on-one, and we should really kind of look at, I know GAA sometimes looks at soccer and doesn't like copying things, but
yeah,
like, with it took us ages to bring in a penalty shootout that should have been in 10 years ago. But I think this is a rule where we just need to copy them. Like, cynical foul, yellow card, anywhere on the pitch, you know what I mean, if it's stopping an attack, or even a red card if it's true on goal, for example.
Yeah. No, absolutely, like, but yeah, that's our rules for you.
Yeah, exactly. And just coming up on that, do you think, David, with some of the rules that keep getting changed the whole time and that confusion, that really hurts referees? I mean, one example is the square ball. The square ball it should have been the square ball on Tuesday last week in a game I played, and the lads were saying, "Oh well, no, it's not a square ball because it has to be from a dead ball." But the rule has moved on and moved on. Is that something that really you get annoyed with as a ref when you give a right decision, but someone's thinking of a rule that was in 3 or 4 years ago?
Yeah, like it's probably like not let's say so much annoying, like but trying to take the opportunity if you can at all to try to explain to that person that actually that was the old rule, that that's not the current rule, but it's certainly it's not good, or not that it's not good, but it's difficult for referees certainly over the last number of years because the rules seem to change every year. So there's always there has tended to be a couple of new ones that we've had to get into our heads and try to understand ourselves first and remember them every year. That's tricky, for a referee. There's no doubt about that.
And how important, just finally before we get into a few quick fires, how important is that the referee support group and your referees as a self, like your tight knit groups? There's obviously a few refs, inter-county refs from Meath. How important are they, just even for a little bit of advice or a bit of one-to-one chat? How important is that tight knit group you have?
Oh, it's really important. I mean, to be honest, if you're not a referee, there's not an awful lot of people, like say that you can talk to about games and about issues and so on, and it's not even that, I suppose. It's that your fellow referees either understand the issues that you're talking about or they've happened to them or whatever, and they can advise you, let's say, in terms of what they did after that particular incident, and so on, so it's great to have that. And you're right, I mean, certainly within Meath now, Cormac Riley would probably be my best friend, in refereeing circles, so we'd be constantly on to each other, during the season. We didn't talk as much over the last 3 or 4 months, but now that we're back, we would chat all the time, and that's good. And then when we're together as a group of inter-county guys, particularly when we get into championship and you're down to kind of 17 or 18 guys, it's good to have kind of the chats in that group, because I think we tend to understand each other.
And is it competitive at all? Just from the outside looking in, with the James McGrath thing, I know that's a different code, so you don't have to comment. But obviously, it is going to be competitive, and you've only got a couple of years at the top or whatever, in terms of making All-Ireland final. Is it competitive at all, or obviously you guys are helping each other as well?
I think it's a combination. So I think we're helping each other. There's no doubt, we do help each other, and if I'm not refereeing on a day, but I'm doing line or standby for someone, well then I'm there to help him, and I'll make sure to try to help him to the best of my ability. But it's no different to players in a squad. Now everybody wants the team to do well, but they want to be on the first team. They want to be on the pitch, so it is competitive. There is no doubt it's competitive, but we also will support each other and help each other out on match day in whatever kind of either as referee or support.
Perfect. Thanks very much, David, for your time. We're going to go through a few quick fire questions. So, what is the worst rule or the most infuriating rule?
Well, sorry, I probably need to explain it, but I think our tackle, there is no properly defined tackle. That's the most infuriating rule. Right from word go. And nothing's changed 25 years later or whatever.
But just on that, so I say this as well a lot about the tackle. Could you come up with a definition on the spot or a half a solution there? What's the best?
Yeah, no, I suppose that's absolutely. And I should have said that. And someone asked me recently a similar enough question. But I did say that I don't have a handy solution. I did, and I do like the international rules tackle, but I appreciate that that's not going to come into GAA, and I wouldn't want it to come into GAA. But it was good in that, from a refereeing point of view, it was clear. you knew exactly what a tackle was and what wasn't a tackle. So I appreciate it's difficult, but I just wonder every time that they come up with the new rules that we've just been talking about, like do they consider the tackle, or do they just decide actually we're not going to go anywhere near the tackle?
Brilliant. So what's the best decision you've ever given?
Best decision I've ever given. One that comes to mind is, and I think it was, to be honest, it was the decision probably that that got me the 2015 All Ireland final. So in that quarter final that I did, it was Kerry and Kildare, I think, was the quarter final, and I remember that there was a decision that it completely looked like it should have been a penalty for Kerry, but from my viewpoint, I thought the keeper made an absolutely fantastic tackle, just got a hand in to dispossess the player, and there was no way it was a penalty. But in the immediate aftermath, I was like, Jesus, I'm not 100%. I'm nearly sure, but obviously I have to stick to my guns. And then the TV replays proved it, so that was a decision that I was particularly happy about.
And your worst decision?
My worst decision, there's so many, my worst decision, I suppose one of the one that comes to mind, well, two come to mind, to be honest. Now, others would probably have a long list, but the two that come to mind. So the first one is actually to do with the black card rule, and the first year it came in, and I did a piece with Pat McEnany and Marty Morrissey in order to kind of do a rollout across the counties and so on. So, I was kind of seen as the the refereeing face of the new black card rule. And then the first round of the Ulster Championship, Down and Tyrone up in Omagh, there was a stonewall black card that I missed, which so it was a penalty incident. Penalty was given, but I totally and utterly forgot about the pull down. Yeah, it was a terrible decision, I have to say. The other one, sorry, was actually a square ball in it was a Kildare Donegal quarter final, All Ireland quarter final. The old rule, but I still got it wrong in terms of the player being in the square before it arrived or whatever, so it led to a goal for Kildare, which I disallowed as a result, which was a dreadful decision.
What's the funniest thing to ever happen to you when you're reffing? Now, this could be a club or inter-county game.
Funniest thing that ever happened, I'm not sure it was one of the things, I'm not sure about it being funny, but I think it was over in Tuam. I think it was refereeing. It was a National League game, Galway, and I'm not really sure, some Ulster team, I think. But I came out after half time, and I don't know what happened, but I forgot my notebook. So I was going ahead, and a score ensued, and no notebook. And then what's more is that it got going straight away. So I didn't even have a chance. I should have blown it straight away. But anyway, this was a number of years ago. I was still learning. So then it was like, crap, there better not be any foul play here that I have to show any card, because I have no cards or nothing. So I think for a minute of that second half, no book, no cards, no nothing. Before I actually went to my linesman and got something from him, but it could have been messy more than funny.
Would you have any good stories of run-ins with managers or players over the years? So you don't have to name names or anything. It can be, again, club or county, but any kind of...
No good stories. there've been both players and managers, like, you know, that you know yourself, like, you know, you try not to have any kind of bias or whatever kind of coming into games or think about things that happened in the past. But there are the couple of players that you know, they could be absolutely, this is like, let's say, within the county. So within the county, there's definitely one particular player who was a fantastic player for the county, brilliant player, and good guy off the pitch, just like no question. But once he gets on the pitch, you can be there and you hear nothing from him, but like after 10, 15 minutes, the first time you make a decision either against him or something that he just doesn't like, and then he's on your back, like from there right to the end. And now you try to deal with him, I suppose, as best you can, like, you know, but yeah, won't name him, but yeah.
He probably knows who he is. Would you ever like to see yourself mic'd up, and in terms of maybe even just the commentator hearing what you're saying?
Yeah, we're back on. Sorry. Sorry.
No.
Yeah, if you start your answer from the start, please, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, no, I'd be very much in favor of that. Like, you know, again, back to what I was saying earlier, like, I think it's really important for a referee to be able to communicate, first of all, to players, but then, yeah, if you can kind of, and we have tried to do this, I think, in the last one or two All-Ireland finals, where there's a link up to RTE or Sky or whatever, so that at least the commentator, the main commentator, can hear what the referee is saying, and that helps as he kind of portrays what's actually what a decision was made for. So I think that's good, and I think we should do more of that. And I think from there, then that whole kind of ref link, like there is in rugby, I see no problem with that. Like, you know, again, it's not that every spectator will agree with your communication of a particular decision, but at least they'll be able to hear what you actually gave it for. So yeah, very much in favour of that.
Just the last one for me before we let you go, Dave. You've been great with your time. So this question, I suppose, we have a lot of people that never refereed before. There's players. What one thing would you like to communicate to them about refereeing, or do you know what I mean? Something that to help them understand a little bit better referees, that the next time they're about to shout at them, that they'll just, you know, rein it in a little bit or kind of half understand where they're coming from.
A message to the people of Ireland, basically, Dave.
You should have told me this in advance. I could have come up with something that, like, you know, really big, and but I think, like, you know, I would hope, I suppose, that the documentary also showed this as well. Like, I mean, we are only human. You know, we try our best. You know, and again, cliche or not, like, you know, without us there would be no games, like, you know. But you know, I think referees, and as you kind of work through kind of the levels and into a way, you know, they could be doing so much other stuff, like, you know, in terms of their spare time, like, you know, but I think, like, you know, it's a tough job, and we have one view of every incident. You have a split second to make that call. We don't have like 10 cameras and you know, guys in studios kind of looking back 10 times on incidents, like, you know. So and that's just the way it is, like, you know. But I love it. And back to something I said very early on, I think if you can't be a player at the top level of, let's say, the GAA in this case, I find that there is no better place than as a referee, and to be there on the on those big games, and seeing guys, you know, at the pinnacle of their careers, let's say, in terms of what they can and can't do, like, you know. And I wouldn't go back. I certainly wouldn't go back now, but, like, you know, if you're starting off, I would give it a go.
Absolutely. Thanks very much for your time, David. We'll try and maybe continue this later on in the season, and we'll see how the Winter All-Ireland is going to fare. But thanks very much for your time. Thank you.
Not at all.
Thanks, David.
Right.